The Trump administration just had the US Secret Service come to my house. This is fascism at its finest.
A liberal influencer trolled Trump in an intentionally antagonistic way, and it backfired spectacularly. We're going to break this down, plus so much more, from Democrat TikTok stars exploiting a health tragedy to a bizarre cancel culture story on Instagram and a Trump tweet that involves some interesting math. All this and so much more is coming up on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our media, and our politics, all from an independent perspective. Up first, we got to check in with a very liberal Democratic influencer named Ed Krasenstein. You may have heard of him and his brother before. They're both pretty popular on the internet, very typical kind of Team Blue guys who engage a lot on Twitter particularly, but also TikTok, Substack, and other platforms. Well, Ed Krasenstein just ended up with the Secret Service knocking on his door because he trolled the Trump administration in a obviously inflammatory way, and they interpreted it as a threat. Let's take a listen to the first part of his video that's since gone viral, explaining what happened.
So moments ago, the Trump administration just had the US Secret Service come to my house. You might be wondering why. Because yesterday I made a post that said 8647, which means, if you look it up, get rid of Trump, as in impeach Donald Trump, as in 25th Amendment Donald Trump, as in vote Trump out of office. Why, you may ask? Because last night on the news, Donald Trump made the claim that 8647 means assassinate him, which it doesn't. I would absolutely never ever call for violence against anyone, let alone the President of the United States. So the Secret Service agents were extremely friendly. They were like, yeah, we understand. It's just something we have to do because Washington told us to. Washington told them to come give me a visit. That's what he said.
So guys, the context here is a big story in the news right now where the former director of the FBI, James Comey, who is an interesting individual, shall we say, with a long partisan past, posted something on Instagram that he came across on his walk along the beach, some shells that said 8647. 86 being slang, and then 47 referring to Trump, the 47th president of the United States. And this prompted this huge scandal over whether this was a call for the death of Trump, because depending on the context, the phrase 87 something can be used to refer to getting rid of something, like in a kitchen or a restaurant, they'll say 86 the pie off the menu, we're out of pie. Or like you might say if somebody gets kicked out of a club, oh, the bouncer 86'd him. That's one form of this slang, but it's also used in like a mafia setting at times to be like, 86, like take him out. So it's kind of inflammatory rhetoric that is at least ambiguous in its implications. And look, I think at a time when political violence, support for political violence is on the rise, and at a time when President Trump, faced 2 assassination attempts, it is not responsible to use your public platform like that, especially as a former high-level government official. And I think we all know what Ed was doing when he was trying to hop in on this game for internet attention and say this edgy thing that people were interpreting as a call for violence. He knew that it would get him the attention that he ordered, and it did. The Secret Service showed up at his house, interviewed him, asked him some questions, realized he wasn't a threat, and then left. I'm going to give you my thoughts on this in more depth, and we're actually going to take a look at another clip from Ed where he makes some interesting claims of what this means and what the implications of it that I think border on hysterical after this. I know my audience doesn't want to end up like this.
Just a reminder that I am very fat and very sexy, and I am 100% glorifying obesity, and there's nothing you can do.
That's why I'm excited to tell you about Lumen, the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's an amazing device that measures your metabolism through your breath, and on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs, and even gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management. This is so important because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does. Optimal metabolic health translates to a ton of benefits, including easier weight management, better fitness fitness results, better sleep, and improved energy levels. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/Brad. That's lumen.me/Brad to get 15% off your Lumen. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring today's episode. So now let's look at the second part of Ed's videos about this saga, where he explains the ramifications of this visit from the Secret Service that he got, and spoiler alert, it's incredibly dramatic.
Trump wants to be a dictator, and I will not be intimidated into not voicing my opinions or my dissent against him. Ever. This is what happens in fascist governments. It's what dictators do in order to intimidate dissenters into keeping quiet. This is fascism at its finest. They redefine the terms and then use those new definitions to go after dissenters and squash anybody that has an opinion different from Trump. They interrogate them, intimidate them, and hope that that intimidation stops them from making posts on social media. We need to vote out fascism in 2026.
Not him putting up Hitler and Putin as the background. Dude, the drama is off the charts. You are not the new Anne Frank, okay? And look, they did not squash your voice. They came to your house and asked you a few questions. So the melodrama here is a little bit out of control for me. That said, I actually do think it was wrong for the Secret Service to go to his house and investigate him for this. And I'll explain why. When Ed posted his tweet, 8647, with pool balls is spelling out that message, he followed it up very shortly after with a second tweet that said, "For the record, I am 100% against violence in any form. Stop creating bogus meanings to try and investigate your political opponents. 8647 means remove Trump from office. If you are creating any other meaning, you are the ones who are going to end up inciting the violence." Now, I still do think that Ed knew what he was doing when he posted this and knew that it was going to upset people, and I think that's why he posted it. I also think, as outraged as he sounds, he also is kind of happy the Secret Service came to his house over this, because it gives him, a chance to go viral and talk about it. And his TikTok got tons of views, his tweets about it have millions of views, and all of that, if you're a content creator, is good stuff, I'll say. But I actually do fundamentally agree that it is inappropriate for the Secret Service to follow up to his house like this, because they came almost a day after he posted that tweet explaining that his tweet was not a call for violence, was not a threat against the Trump presidency, and that he simply wanted to say, get rid of Trump, remove him, impeach him. And whether you agree with that or not, that's totally free speech. He's well within his right to say it, and Secret Service should not be doing house calls over that kind of boilerplate political speech. It is inappropriate, and obviously we can't confirm this, but if Washington ordered this, then I think that's an overstep, and I do think it is a little bit chilling. It could have a chilling effect on people feeling free to speak out online if the Secret Service may show up at their door for something they posted that they clarified was not meant in a violent way. So while I certainly think Ed here is being incredibly dramatic, he's not entirely wrong that this is inappropriate from the Trump administration if it all played out how he said it played out. And I have to point out some hypocrisy here and some clear confusions about the law from the Trump administration. For example, Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, a very high-ranking Trump official, said this on television about James Comey's original 8647 post.
This is the guy who's issuing a hit on President Trump, the president that the American people voted for.
Do you believe Comey should be in jail?
I do. Any other person with the position of influence that he has, people who take very seriously what a guy of his stature, his experience, and what the propaganda media has built him up to be, I'm very concerned for the president's life. We've already seen assassination attempts. I'm very concerned for his life. And James Comey, in my view, should be held accountable and put behind bars for this.
This is really wrong. James Comey's post is not calling a hit out on the president, and he can't be prosecuted or jailed over a First Amendment protected thing that he posted on Instagram. We can criticize him for it. We can say it's reckless, it's irresponsible, it's inflammatory, and I absolutely do say all of that. But even if you look at the dictionary definition of 86, the slang from Merriam-Webster, It says that it originates in the food service industry and is slang meaning to throw out, get rid of, or refuse service to, although they do note that it's sometimes used to mean to kill. However, they do say that that's a pretty rare usage of the term. So you can't prosecute someone for speech that has a pretty plausible and clear, totally legal, not at all violent implication. And Republicans themselves have used this exact kind of language many times. In February of 2024, former Congressman Matt Gaetz, for example, tweeted, "We've now 86th McCarthy, McDaniel, McConnell. Better days are ahead for the Republican Party." And he was referring to politicians that they had removed from their positions or gotten to step down, obviously not referring to violence in any way. Meanwhile, this might be the most glaring hypocrisy I've ever seen. The far-right influencer Jack Posobiec tweeted after this thing happened with Comey, "The former director of the FBI is calling for left-wing assassins to target our president and kill him. Have no idea why he hasn't been arrested yet." Now, what makes this hypocritical and ironic beyond belief is that Jack Posobiec himself in 2022, when Biden was president, wrote in a tweet, 86-46, referring to Joe Biden. Notably, he was not arrested at the time, Secret Service did not go to his house, and by his own standards, apparently he should have been jailed. Now, in reality, nothing should have happened to him because, like I said, as inflammatory as this rhetoric may be, and I have called time and time again for us to take down the temperature, it is First Amendment protected free speech. You don't just have to take my word for it. The nonpartisan Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, FIRE, the nation's premier free speech legal organization, which, disclaimer, I do a little bit of freelance work for, said this in a statement. Former FBI Director James Comey's now deleted 8647 social media post is political speech protected by the First Amendment. It neither constitutes a true threat nor merits federal investigation, and there is Supreme Court precedent to prove it. So this is like a basic thing that seems to get lost in so much of our political discourse these days, but two things can be true at the same time. That trolling and inflammatory rhetoric should be called out and really should be stopped on both sides of the aisle. But also, unless it meets a very, very high bar and crosses some bright red lines that were not crossed in any of these cases we're talking about, it's not a criminal matter. And like it or not, it's protected by the First Amendment, and it's protected free speech, which means federal law enforcement should not be getting involved. That's my take, but what do you guys think? Do you feel sympathy for Ed Krasenstein here, or do you think he kind of brought this on himself? Let me know in the comments, and please do hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed while you're at it. Remember, guys, to send in voice notes for my Friday episodes where I react to your woke horror stories and your personal situations and give you my advice. Remember to also subscribe to my new second channel where I'm uploading tons of bonus content. Up next, today is a day that ends in Y, so Democrat TikTokers are exploiting a tragedy. We just got the very sad news that former President Biden has advanced prostate cancer, and of course, like me and basically all good-natured people, just wish him the best, wish him a good recovery. I will say this. A few people on X I saw like basically happy that he's sick or something. And if you ever find yourself rooting for cancer, partisan politics and tribalism may have broken your brain. But also, if you start exploiting a cancer diagnosis to achieve political ends or shut down inconvenient political narratives, like several prominent Democratic TikTokers did, that's also not good and not going to work. For example, here's a video from the Democratic strategist and influencer Olivia Juliana.
And to every single one of those Democratic figures who has spent the last few weeks going after Biden, I hope that you feel the weight of how much of a piece of trash you actually are. Because now you haven't just been going after someone who is no longer in elected office, who no longer has power. You've been going after a grandfather who has an extremely aggressive form of cancer, who is probably trying to live out the rest of his days with his family. And instead of spending your time and using your platforms to talk about the guy who is cutting research funding to kids with cancer and deporting children with cancer, you're going after the guy who is no longer in the White House. And that's why I have no tolerance for this bullshit anymore. Leave Joe Biden alone. Move on past 2024 and focus on the shit that we're dealing with right now in 2025.
So this is wild to me because this influencer, who is clearly a Biden fangirl, is suggesting that people should feel bad for having criticized the Biden administration and their cover-up of his clear cognitive decline because it turns out he has cancer. But of course, I don't even agree with that logic, but even if you did, well, no one knew he had cancer until he just revealed it. So how are they supposed to account for that in their criticisms and commentary when they didn't even know about this fact? That doesn't even make sense. And more importantly, as much as I wish him the best and hope that he can recover from this, and my heart goes out to his family, you don't get a pass on a massive scandal and abuse of power that I think imperiled our national security. The fact that our president was in severe cognitive decline and they covered it up and worked to push false narratives, and official after official and media personality after media personality came on TV or on air or in front of reporters and insisted that nothing to see here, it's all just Republican misinformation. Well, guess what? When you have a president who's not up to the job, who forgets lifelong friends and gets confused about basic facts, that imperils our national security, because at any moment he could be called into the Situation Room and have to make, even at 4 a.m, have to make a decision that affects literally the fate of the human race when it comes to nuclear weapons or something like that. So no, it's very sad that Biden has cancer, but we're not going to just shut up and never criticize his administration or the lies and the deceit again because he's sick. That's not a get out of jail free card for everything that you did wrong in your life, nor should it be. But another Democratic TikTok star, Harry Sisson, had a similar argument in a video he put out. Let's take a look at that.
So President Biden was just diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer. It's also metastasized into his bones, which is incredibly concerning and incredibly heartbreaking. So I wanted to take this opportunity to say shame on anyone, and I mean anyone, who continues to beat up on Joe Biden. This man is no longer an elected official. He has dedicated his life to public service, whether you agree with him or not, and he is a father, a grandfather, and a man with cancer who wants to live out the rest of his life with his family. But right now, we have conservatives and people in the media profiting off of, writing books about, commentating on this man's health. And to anybody doing that, shame on you.
So I really just reject this framing entirely. I mean, Democrats never had the same energy, nor should they have, to be clear, about just moving on and no longer discussing former President Trump's alleged misdeeds and alleged crimes after his first term, even though he's a father and a grandfather. That's just kind of irrelevant. I mean, well, he's no longer in power. Just move on and talk about what's happening now. I mean, none of y'all had that energy in 2021, 2022, 2023, when you continued to go after Trump for the things that he did or didn't, I mean, depending how you view the different allegations, did wrong in his first term as president. And to be clear, I don't think you should. I don't think like a term ends and just everything's the past, let it all go. But by your own logic, you should have. See how that doesn't make sense? And again, you don't get to just negate this whole very serious controversy and cover up just because he's sick now. In fact, this actually raises even more questions about this cover up because, according to medical experts, it is unlikely that they really just discovered this cancer now. He certainly had this cancer already when he was president, and if they somehow didn't know about it, then that's a scandal in and of itself because he has the best medical care there is. He's supposed to have the best medical care and a whole team of doctors and nurses attending to him, and they should have caught it. And then if he did know and they just covered it up, that's another issue that should be raised. So if Harry thinks that this means we're going to move on from discussing Biden's health, no. It means the opposite. And I want to be clear, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an oncologist, but the questions I'm raising about the cancer and the timeline here are being raised by many serious, nonpartisan, non-ideological medical professionals. Just listen to this clip of a doctor on News Nation.
It's very unusual to hear that someone has prostate cancer where they're annually being followed up. And the fact that we just find it at a Gleason 9 is just pretty much unheard of in this day and age of medicine. Even in the, even in the inner city populations, we wouldn't see it.
So you're saying
this
even in a medically neglected population, it would be surprising to have a surprise diagnosis with a Gleason score of 9. So you're saying that certainly as he was serving in the Oval Office, you believe that he knew that he had prostate cancer and even potentially as he was running in 2020 before he assumed office?
Well, most likely he had prostate cancer for a long time, and the aggressive prostate cancer such as this at age 80 grows over a long period of time. I mean, usually it takes from the first diagnosis of prostate cancer to spread would take 5 to 10 years.
So to be very clear, you believe he was silently, secretly battling this for at least 5 years?
Well, I think that's yet to be seen. I mean, it would be very surprising, like I said earlier, for him to have prostate cancer at Gleason 9 spread to bone without, without being neglected medically. So the fact that he was seen medically every year, I think there's definitely evidence that he probably knew about this for a while.
So no, we are not going to be moving on from discussing Biden's health after this, and you're not going to emotionally blackmail or shame us into doing so. I understand that for Democratic partisans like Harry and like Olivia, it would be very convenient if nobody talked about the massive scandals that they may have even participated in terms of denying Biden's clear cognitive decline, but we are not going to move on so quickly. There's still a lot of reckoning and accountability that needs to happen, and while Biden's cancer diagnosis is really sad, and I genuinely do wish him all the best, I'm not going to cave to the emotional blackmail of that, meaning we can no longer criticize what happened while he was president or his scandals, and I don't think most Americans are going to buy that narrative either. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Up next, we're going to check in on the woke world of Instagram, in particular, Threads, the kind of Twitter clone that Instagram created that I personally don't really use very much, but I heard about this crazy story from Katie Herzog on the Blocked and Reported podcast, one of my favorite podcasts that you guys have to subscribe to if you don't already, because the famous author Stephen King is facing tons of backlash right now on Instagram Threads in one of the most absurd and farcical sagas I've seen in a minute. For context, guys, I've always really liked Stephen King's books. I like fantasy, I like science fiction, so I've read a bunch of his books over the years, but he, politically speaking, has been a very outspoken, and I have always found him to be very simplistic and trite and partisan and kind of hysterical because he is a hardcore, like, resistance lib, like Trump is evil, just kind of a reliable Team Blue commentator who I've never found particularly interesting and has just, always just bashed Trump, just adopted the typical liberal position and what have you. But now he's getting canceled by his own side because you can never, ever, ever be woke enough for some people, especially very online progressives. What did he do that was so horrible? Well, he dared to write this very lame joke on Instagram Threads. Why did Donald Trump cross the road? To see Haitians eating pets on the other side. So this is not really funny, but it's clearly supposed to be a joke about Trump being the butt of the joke, and how Trump claimed that there were Haitians eating dogs and pets in Springfield, Ohio, even though there was no evidence of that. So like a very lame joke, but clearly one intended to mock Donald Trump, not Haitian immigrants. But of course, the woke scolds on Instagram Threads acted like he just did a hate crime against Haitian immigrants. The replies to his original post are something to behold. Why are you making racist jokes? Welp, that's the end of you, and this is why this generation of Haitians really need to reach back into our ancestral voodoo bag, because Stephen King should be choking on his own tongue right now. Oh, well, that woman seems lovely and stable. Another person wrote, "Leave Haitians alone, sir. Go write a book on the real villain, white supremacy." Another person wrote in a comment replying to Stephen, "It's disappointing to see Stephen King using immature humor instead of thoughtful political discussion. His words fuel harmful stereotypes rather than encouraging understanding. A voice like his could be used more constructively. Fame does not equate to wisdom, integrity, or thoughtful discourse. A well-known name doesn't automatically make someone insightful or responsible in how they use their platform." Is it just me, or was that last reply giving AI wrote that? And I even agree with parts of it, but I just don't agree that Stephen King was fueling harmful stereotypes. If anything, he was trying to highlight what he sees as the absurdity of these untrue stereotypes to attack Trump. I just don't know how anyone can look at that post and think it's meant to mock Haitians. To his credit, Stephen King defended himself and said the joke was about Trump. If you don't get that, you should see a doctor and get your sense of humor checked. To me, that's indicative of maybe a little bit of a vibe shift. I can imagine in 2020, in the old era of like woke Twitter mobs, Stephen King like groveling and apologizing when he's accused of racism rather than defending himself. And to the extent that the culture has shifted in that sense, where people no longer instantly cave to outrageous and ridiculous accusations of racism, that's a good thing. But still, the backlash, and Katie covered this on the podcast, so I went and looked into it, and really it was even worse than I expected. On Instagram Threads, the discourse about Stephen King was just absolutely unhinged that emerged, all because of this one little innocent post. One person named the leftist lawyer wrote, "What Stephen King said was racist and wrong, full stop. Defending it is wrong, full stop. No one is forcing you to defend him, just don't. And no one is canceling him by saying he did something wrong and gross and should apologize. It's called accountability. If he won't take accountability for his actions, he's canceling himself." This woman helpfully added, "At this point, if you're white and defending Stephen King's joke in my mentions, I'm blocking you. My page is a safe space for marginalized people." Bruh, seriously? We're still doing safe spaces in 2025? And how do people not realize how incredibly condescending this is to your minority followers, saying they need to be protected from anybody arguing that this obvious joke wasn't racist? As if, what, you think the racial minorities that follow you are like mentally toddlers who need their emotions protected by you, the bold, brave, stunning white savior? Gosh, the cringe and condescension is off the charts. Another person wrote, "Y'all, if Stephen King put on blackface to make fun of Trump, would you get why it's anti-black racism? A white man telling a shitty joke that relies on anti-black content, no matter the context or intention, always fuels anti-blackness. Telling black people they are dumb for not getting it only exposes your racism." I am so tired. I can't believe that people still actually speak and think this way in the year of our Lord, 2025. Joking about the Haitians eating pets meme is not, in fact, equivalent to doing blackface. That's absurd. And when your argument relies on the statement, "Regardless of any context or intention, this thing is bad and harmful," you've just revealed that you're just looking to be offended for its own sake. Because actually, context and intent are incredibly important when we're determining whether something is actually harmful or shouldn't be said. And I love this idea that you can't disagree with black people without you being racist. And this absurd idea that all black people must be offended and outraged by Stephen King's posts. I mean, maybe a lot on Instagram Threads are, but that is not a representative sample. That is a tiny, tiny liberal bubble of a slice of people who are probably journalists or academics or something like that. So you're speaking for a black community that would largely not agree with you and then weaponizing race to just smear anybody who questions you. Are we back in 2020, y'all? Another crazy post reads, "Stephen King is another example of what happens when white liberals are more concerned with dunking on bigots than helping racialized communities. They engage in bigotry themselves and end up hurting the racialized communities they profess to care for. Figure out your SHIT and your goals already." I would really love to know. Please explain to me in depth, walk me through from point A to point B to point C, how Stephen King's joke on Instagram Threads harms racialized communities. Please, take me to one of these communities. I will pay our travel both ways, ma'am. Take me to one of these communities and show me how it was harmed by this joke. Show me on the doll where the joke harmed you, babe. Like, this is absurd. It's just not true. And I just, over and over again, I keep encountering these stories that really prove to me that the progressive online left, at least, we've heard noises from leading figures in the Democratic Party, but the actual online base has not moved on from the unhinged identitarian and cancel culture and woke politics that hamstrung the Democratic Party for years, that most Americans find insufferable. They're still engaging in this kind of circular firing squad of constantly trying to cancel each other and play victim oppression Olympics. And to normal people, even to radical liberals like Stephen King, it comes off as incredibly unhinged and unpleasant. But other than that, though, things are going amazing over on Instagram threads. Gee, I wonder why their users and view numbers and traffic is plummeting. I'm just shocked by that, y'all. Absolutely shocked. What do you guys think? Are you surprised to see progressives still acting like this on the internet, or are you not actually shocked at all? Let me know in the comments. Up next, we got to talk about this because Trump is fighting with Walmart and it's getting weird. Let's take a listen to some reporting from CNN.
President Trump a short time ago telling Walmart that the company should, I'm quoting now, eat the cost, end quote, of higher tariffs. The comments come after the retail giant said this week that it would raise prices because of Trump's tariffs being too high. Walmart has more than 4,600 stores in the U.S. It's also the biggest private employer in the country with 1.6 million workers. Several countries that supply Walmart include China, and they're facing tariffs between 10 and 30% right now.
So it's funny to me to see Trump telling Walmart to eat the tariffs. What he means is that they should absorb the cost of their tariffs and just take the loss from their profits, not raise prices for consumers. But what's so funny about that to me is that Trump told us over and over and over again that there are no costs for America, because foreign countries pay the tariffs. But now he's telling Walmart to eat the costs rather than pass them on to consumers. Do you guys see how those two things can't be true all at once? Either all the costs are borne by foreign countries, like he said, which I've always thought was not true, or there are costs and American companies have to figure out how to deal with them. Now, that second scenario has always been true, but the Trump administration has suggested otherwise, and now his own comments are acknowledging the truth of the matter. But more importantly, it's actually not possible for Walmart to just eat the tariffs and absorb all the costs. They run on very slim profit margins of just 2 to 3%, and the total cost of the tariffs would potentially eat up all of the profit that they do run. Take a listen to this explanation from an expert in supply chain logistics on CNN.
About a third of Walmart's products are subject to tariffs. Tariffs used to be about 1%. On the average of all the countries, it's probably going to go up to about 10 to 15%. Their net profit margin is less than 3%. So if they eat these tariffs, they will actually lose money. So Walmart will figure it out. Companies like Amazon will figure it out. It's some of those other retailers that are really going to struggle. But even an efficient giant like Walmart has a very difficult time absorbing these tariffs.
So like the math is not even really mathematically possible that they could just absorb these huge costs and just take it out of their profits without passing anything on to consumers. But even if they were to do that, there would still be tremendous downsides. Because when people hear profits, they think that, oh, that's just the money that the bigwigs are stuffing into their pockets and paying themselves in bonuses and all that. And of course, some of that is what it is. But profits at a place like Walmart are also used to reinvest in expansions, building new stores, hiring new people, growing the company, expanding the brand into new lanes and new areas. Sometimes profits are reinvested into raising employee wages and benefits to attract new workers and competitive hiring times. And then even when the money is just sent out in different forms of shareholder returns, that's then money that they go spend and invest somewhere else. So even if they were to absorb all the costs of the tariffs, there would still be significant economic harm that's being lost out on. And of course, they can't even mathematically do it. The truth is that maybe you support President Trump's tariffs. I'm a free trade person. I've been against it from the start. But if you do support it, you at least have to acknowledge that there are serious costs and trade-offs. Maybe you think it will be worth it in the end, but you cannot pretend. And President Trump has tried to pretend this, but it's quickly falling apart before his eyes to the point where he's basically admitting it, that there are real downsides and real costs associated with these policies, and some of it is going to be borne by Americans. There's just no escaping that inconvenient fact. What do you guys think? Do you agree with Trump on this? Do let me know in the comments. All right, guys, that'll be it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Please do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button before you go. Comment with your thoughts, yada, yada, yada. Make sure to send me some voice notes for my Friday episode. Subscribe to my second channel, all that linked in the description. And with that, we'll talk again real soon.